I am so honored to be here today. I've worked with and spoken to members of the Living Beyond Breast Cancer before, and I love the type of breast cancer topics that you discuss. I was thinking about the topic you had last week on menopause and how important that is, and how I'm going to go to your website and see this. So, thank you for asking me today to come to talk about clinical trials, specifically in breast cancer, which is near and dear to my heart. Like you mentioned, I work for a nonprofit right now that runs a couple of big adaptive platform trials, and my role is just to make sure everyone has access to these trials and to help educate about another one of our nonprofit projects that we help support, which is breastcancertrials.org, which is a online free software trial matching program, which I'll be going over later on in the talk to help you find. Anyone can go online and look for and find a trial. So today I'm just going to do a quick overview. Let me share my slides. Oh, and just a little bit quickly about me. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I'm a medical oncologist for over 20 years. I've worked at a number of places practicing, mainly with breast cancer patients. I also worked at the FDA for a while reviewing breast cancer drugs, and now I work for clinical trials. All right, so today I'd like to talk about clinical trials, a little bit of background, how to understand what they are, and the important part is how to find them. My academic affiliation for the last, wow, 10 or so years has been with Howard University Cancer Center, where I've held a lot of roles, including the director of clinical trials there. The agenda, I'll go through many components of clinical trials, what to expect, importance of diversity, becoming a kid, give a few resources at the end. And if time, I'll go through an example of using breast cancer trial. So what is a clinical trial? So a clinical trial is a research study. It involves people, and these are all volunteers. And the goal is to determine if a new product the mantra is safe, if it works safely in humans, and if it works, if it's effective. There can be a number of different types of treatment. It could be medicine, it could be a procedure, a device being tested, approaches to screening like mammography or even a blood test like PSA. And even behavioral changes can be a treatment and looking at the way a disease is affected. Why do clinical trials matter? Why are they important? Well, everything that you see on the shelves, anything that's prescribed to you by your doctor has been rigorously tested through a clinical trial. So the things that are helping us and that we know work are only available because a clinical trial was done that included volunteers to help us identify these standard best treatments. When a drug or a device goes through a development stage, in most cases, it goes in the US through the FDA, and it goes through usually three, maybe four phases of clinical trials before it's determined to be safe, effective, and okay for your doctor to prescribe. So each phase is answering an important question. In phase 1 studies, which are the first in human studies, which are the smallest, it's looking at safety. And so usually the patients may have all different types of cancers if it's a cancer phase 1, but really looking at what's the safest dose of this medication in a human. When it's found to be safe, it goes on to phase 2, which is a little larger study. They know now that it's safe. And in the phase 1, they looked at the different type of tumors to figure out which one would be best to look at in phase 2. Because in phase 2, everybody has the same type of, for a cancer trial, cancer. And it's looking at how well this drug works against that cancer. So how effective is it? So after phase 2 study, if it looks like the drug could be as good or as effective or better than our best treatment, are much year studies. And that's the studies that the FDA usually looks at to determine whether it's a drug that can be approved and again, be out in the community and prescribed. And it's being compared to our best, our standard of care. Usually it's randomized, meaning that a patient if they decide to enroll, is kind of randomly selected to go into one arm or another based on statistics. So those are the main three phases that all drugs go through. Times the drug may be asked to have a phase 4 study, which is after the drug's out in the community, it's being prescribed, it's been approved, to see if there are any long-term effects that we need to be concerned with. So those are the four phases of clinical trials. In breast cancer, just to very generally divide up the way we kind of bunch our clinical trials, there are early stage trials, meaning they're clinical trials that are being performed on patients who have breast cancer stage 0, which is ductal carcinoma in situ, through stage 3. All of these are scenarios where the cancer has been treated, usually with involving some type of surgery, and there's a systemic or chemotherapy given before or after. And the clinical trials are trying to optimize to try to improve what we have already, to see if we can be more personalized with our treatments, so that some women we know may not need as much as we're giving. All stage 3 patients kind of get the same treatment right now, but we're learning to find ways of doing research to find, are there women we can de-escalate a little bit? Or maybe there's some women, a group we find, that don't do as well with the treatment. They have a higher risk of recurrence. Should we escalate the treatment? So that's all in the process right now of different studies. We look at survivorship after treatment, especially in early stage, to see if there are things that can be done to prevent recurrences. And then we have the metastatic or stage 4 setting, where a lot of the focus of the treatment are on newer, innovative drugs to try to improve what we have. Because the more drugs we have in our arsenal to use, the longer we can keep people alive and functioning and good quality of life. And we're looking at biomarkers and targets, and you'll hear a lot of that terminology if you're in clinical research. Um, in terms of the type of trials that there are, I've been talking a lot about treatment trials, when there's an intervention and the patient actually gets something, a drug or something happens. But there are screening trials like mammography, or different ways to detect a disease or a cancer before it occurs. Prevention trials, are there things we can give or do to help prevent a disease from occurring? Quality of life studies. They can be on their own, or they can be along with a treatment trial, to look at how the treatment works in patients, to see if the toxicities or the side effects are worse than what we have already. Because not only do we want safe and effective, but we want drugs that aren't going to give a lot of toxicities to patients as well. Very important, because that affects survivorship. Now, a lot of people have questions about clinical trials. Some people just shy away because there is too much of an unknown. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll feel a little bit more comfortable thinking about clinical research. But these are some general pros and cons that we've found in research that people consider. So I'm just going to go through them on my own with pros first. So we said potential for better, safer treatment. This one is also actually a pro. You have an increased number of treatment options available, especially in some settings where there are few treatment options. Clinical trials offer the potential for better and more. Again, we talked about this, the coverage of the cost for care. This also is a pro. Closer monitoring by your cancer care team when you're on a clinical trial. Just by the nature of the study, they're going to be seeing you more often, maybe doing a few more tests, keeping an eye on the cancer a little more tightly while you're on treatment. And these are the cons. We have uncertain side effects in the investigational treatments. The treatment may not work as well as we expect. It could be a con. If you're randomized, you may not get the arm that you want. You may go in there thinking you'd like the experimental drug. And some are blinded, meaning that either you may not know the drug that you're getting, and sometimes it's double blinded, where your physician, the principal investigator, will not know the drug that you're getting either until the very end. And some people aren't comfortable with that. But no matter what the outcome, if you decide to participate in a clinical trial, it allows you to be active and taking a role in your not your own care, but helping to determine um, our future uh, our future therapies. So, how do you find a clinical trial? So, there's a couple of ways. These first two are sites online where you, as a patient or your provider or anyone, can go to look up clinical trials in US based clinical trials. I'll talk a little bit about them in just a minute. But if you're diagnosed with cancer or you're being treated for anything, but I'll focus on breast cancer right now, the first thing you should do is ask your oncologist. And you can ask your medical oncologist, your radiation oncologist, your surgical oncologist, anyone um, who is on your team. You can ask the patient navigator if you haven't heard about clinical research from your provider. And then separately, what I've found recently, and this is an example of your patient portal, is that in some of the mobile patient portals, say for instance, this is Epic, you can go in and you can find a tab called research studies that you can click on. So those are, different ways that you can look into what's being done where you're being taken care of. If your oncologist doesn't mention clinical research to you, make sure you ask. Lots of reasons that a provider may not mention clinical research, and I'll go over that in a bit, but for whatever that reason, empower yourself by saying, is there a clinical trial that you think that would be appropriate for me? And hopefully that will trigger that provider to make sure they ask that question or give that information the next time.
Dr. Horton, I'm going to ask you a quick question. If that's
Yes.
okay, because I think that we hear this a lot at Living Beyond Breast Cancer. Do you suggest that when you're newly diagnosed, whether it's early stage or metastatic, that is the time to ask about a trial? Or, if you could give any guidance around that?
Yeah. So I'm glad you asked because I say earlier in every case, because one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that there are clinical trials for just about every stage of not only breast cancer, but any disease. And so I think it's important to ask your provider if you do they think that you would be appropriate for a trial from the minute you're diagnosed, and then at every stage, be it even survivorship. If you're following up for your follow-up visit, everything looks good. Maybe there's a new study where they're testing exercise or nutritional differences or, meditation in survivors to see if that impacts your outcome. And these kind of trials are also all listed in clinicaltrials.gov and breastcancertrials.org. So you can go and search for those trials yourselves at any point, even if you're not in the doctor's office. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And one other thing I wanted to mention is a lot of people have heard that clinical trials are only for patients who don't have any other options of treatment. Either you've been through everything, or you're metastatic, or it's someone who can't tolerate any other treatment. But that's not necessarily the case. Think of them sooner rather than later. Think of them in any scenario. Um, if you're at a community cancer center or any cancer center that does not run clinical trials, you might want to look at academic centers or universities in your area. Just give them a call, find out if they have any studies or if they're aware of places that have clinical trials. Not all trials are done at all sites, and that's the unfortunate part, and why being able to go onto either breastcancertrials.org or clinicaltrials.gov is helpful, because they will list all the sites that are doing that specific study. Okay. And different sites do different studies. So just don't check one, try to find out the different places in your area that are doing clinical research. It may mean that you have to go to a place other than where you're getting your care for that study, but usually keep in touch with your oncologist and send information back in their communication. Another way of finding clinical research, especially if you're in a rural area or areas that have a lot of community cancer centers is NCI, something called NCORP, NCORP, which is their NCI Community Oncology Research Program, where they band together a bunch of community centers and they do the administration of clinical trials for these sites. So places you could always check. And then, of course, these wonderful advocacy groups and nonprofits like Living Beyond Breast Cancer, American Cancer Society, Komen. I work with Tiger Lily and Sisters Network and Share. And so there's lots of organizations that you can contact that may be able to help direct you to places that can tell you about clinical trials. So lots of ways to find them. So this is breastcancertrials.org, which is um, specifically breast cancer trials. Now, I'm going to go back very quickly to clinicaltrials.gov is on NIH's website, and it is a database full of all the clinical trials that are registered through the FDA in the United States. So not just cancer, could be diabetes, cardiovascular, whatever. Any clinical trial is listed at clinicaltrials.gov. It's comprehensive, but it's also a bit clunky and can be difficult to get through if you don't have a medical background or a technology background. So it's a wonderful thing to have. It's not the easiest to use. And because of that, breastcancertrials.org was started back in the late 90s at UCSF by a woman who was a researcher at UCSF who was diagnosed with breast cancer and discovered she had to go all over the place to try to find these trials. And she partnered with UCSF to develop this online software program, which was actually launched, I think, in 2008 or 9. So it's been available for almost 20 years, a long time. And it's a wonderful resource if you're interested in finding a clinical trial. And I can, at the end, go through very quickly a demonstration, but this is kind of what breastcancertrials.org has to offer. It has a trial search, one that we call Breast Cancer Trial Search, that's focused on stages 0 to 3 clinical trials. And they have clinical trials on actual treatment, on quality of life trials, on survivorship after you're done with treatment. Are there clinical trials? Some you don't even have to leave your home for. There is a separate search for metastatic breast cancer. After a couple of years of launching breastcancertrials.org, the advocates for metastatic breast cancer specifically said they want something that was for them. And so this is a really comprehensive trial search for stage 4 disease on all different levels. And along with that is Metastatic Trial Talk, which is a monthly newsletter that's put out with some of the newest innovative technology, and as well as just really great information for anyone who has metastatic breast cancer. And the newest addition to breastcancertrials.org, which I'm really excited about, is about a year ago, we brought on a clinical trial navigator. So she's a nurse breast oncologist navigator, certified navigator, who also is a survivor, who is available for anyone to make a Candidly appointment. There's a tab on the website where you can make an appointment if you're not comfortable putting your information and trying to find the trial yourself. You can save the information, come back to it. And she also does open hours. I forgot what she called it, but she has times where she'll just kind of post some hours where she's available to answer questions so people can hear what other people are asking, which is, I think, an amazing opportunity. So this is the web page for breastcancertrials.org. You just click on this box if you want to do it. It'll start you on your search for stage 0 to 3. And if you're looking for metastatic trials, you can click on this box. And if you've got time, you just lots of little tutorial. This is a QRS. I'll show this at the end of the presentation, or you barriers to clinical trials. What we hear often is reasons why people can't or won't or try and it doesn't work being on a trial is because of geography. It's either the study is not available near them, it's too far to go, there's a lot of visits you have to make, it takes time off from work, that's money, travel costs money, caregiving for your kids or for adults study. The cost, most of the time, and we really encourage this, there is a financial review for the patient before they go on to the trial to just so you'll have an idea what out-of-pocket costs would be. And insurance now covers the cost of standard of care. Anything that's not the standard of care, the sponsor will pay for. You're not responsible. Sometimes it's a language barrier, be it actual a different language speaking. And so we have a lot of translation of our documents, and sites are really starting to try to make sure they have navigators who are either speak a second language, and health literacy barriers and just not understanding the lingo of what's involved in a clinical trial. And so we have a lot of educational materials. We have navigators being trained to help people really make informed consents. Again, we said the trial may not be available. There's always the trust issue, as I'll call it. There's been historically distrust of medical research for a lot of very, very good reasons. I won't go into them all. Some of you are familiar about some of the studies that were unethical studies that are done in the past. There are a lot of patient protections in place now to make sure that never happens again, making sure patients are informed, understand what's involved in the study, what's being done with all of the data that's being collected, and how it's going to be used. And then there's the eligibility criteria. Every study has a list of requirements of the patient, which we call eligibility criteria, to make sure it's safe for them to be in the study. And sometimes it means you can't have any type of kidney disease or heart disease that some people may have had, and it may exclude them. So it's important to go through all of the criteria of the trial. And then a big barrier we're finding, unfortunately, these days is that patients are not being asked by their doctors about clinical research. It's never mentioned. They don't know to mention it, and so it's not even in the discussion. So this is hoping this will help to empower you to know that it should be in the conversation if it's not, to bring it up. Overcoming these barriers. So in terms of the financial responsibilities, of course, request financial navigation early. Ask them if they don't talk to you about the cost of being in the trial. In terms of the language barriers, interpreters, a lot of sites have them. Ask for them. If they don't have them, ask for translated materials. Bring someone with you if possible. Two sets of ears are always better than one, I always say. Sometimes I know if I had someone who was coming alone, I would ask them to call someone who they felt comfortable with if you wanted to do that, just to listen while they're getting this information. Um, Discuss the schedule of visits. It's important to know what's going to be expected of you time-wise on a study, and so you can ask to see the schedule of visits. Ask if there are remote monitoring possibilities. Some studies have them. If for some reason you're not found to be a candidate for a study, you're really excited about that drug, ask about expanded access, meaning that the principal investigator can make a request from the FDA specifically for you to receive this drug outside of the trial. And it would be monitored as well, but it has to be, and it's not always granted, but it can be granted. And the pharmaceutical company usually provides it free of charge as well. And then again, we talked about the NCI Community Oncology Research Program if you can't find a program near you. All right, so you've decided that you're going to be in a study. So what is going to be expected of you? So, and what should you expect more than that? What should you want from this? So hopefully the language and the informed consent is something that you understand. We've been working, those of us who work in clinical trials have been working with advocates to review all of the informed consents to make sure that a patient would find this acceptable. And because it needs to explain everything in a way that the patients should understand. You can ask questions and take your time. Don't ever feel rushed if you're considering a clinical trial. If you are, you can either tell them, look, I need my time. Um, there, there are some that have time intervals from the time of, say, your diagnosis or your last MRI, but you ask about that and take the time, bring the papers home, mull over it, have someone you know or respect read it with you, and you can withdraw at any point of being in a trial, even if you're just going through the screening, or you could have started and you're on your third dose. You can withdraw at any time. All clinical trials are overseen by independent review boards. So there's an IRB, which is an institutional review board, which reviews all of the material that comes through from the study to make sure that it's safe. And they're not associated with the trial at all. And so that gives you kind of an unbiased scientific eyes on the study to make sure it's ethical, it's safe. And then during the study, every study has um, a what we call a safety board, a safety monitoring board that they have to put together. The study has to put together of, again, experts in the field that are not associated with the study who periodically, be it quarterly, look at the data that's coming out of that study and make sure that there's no red flags, there's no safety issues that need to be addressed. And during the study, the clinical trial is required to note and gather and keep track of all the toxicities. We call it toxic events or toxicities, or we call them adverse events that happen with the study. And those are all sent into the FDA. That's one of the things I did as a medical reviewer is I would receive the adverse event forms from a study, and we keep an eye on it throughout the entire study so that if we saw anything that was a red flag or didn't look right or too many people are having lung problems on this, we then can contact the sponsor and a range of things up to stopping the trial if it's serious enough until it's identified and fixed. So in terms of cost and coverage basics, in general, anything that's experimental or research or study related to the research, study drugs or tests that are done only for the trial are covered by the sponsor. You are not, as a patient or participant, responsible for those costs. If it's standard of care or routine care that you would have gotten off study, then those are covered through your insurance. So there may be a deductible with those. And again, that could be worked out before you enter a study, but it would be the same that you would be paying if you were off the study. Um, Again, we want you to ask for what's called a coverage analysis if you're interested in a study to find out what those costs are. And there are some out-of-pocket costs that are indirectly related to being in a clinical trial, maybe travel or parking or time off of work, that there really is no built-in way of supporting those costs. We're working on it in research, trying to get policy change to help support it. Some trials have built it in, some haven't. It's something you've got to ask about. But there are a lot of nonprofits out in the community that are starting to put together resource funding for patients, not only who are just dealing with cancer treatment, but also on clinical trial.
Horton, can I just add one thing and you can take a breath?
Oh, absolutely.
I think that issue is so important of those out-of-pocket costs. And I will say this is a way that patient advocates can get involved. And we have involved patient advocates in the study design phase. And sometimes those expenses can be built in as part of the costs that are covered because it takes a real toll if you have to travel or spend the night or miss work. So for everybody watching, just know this is a way you can get involved as an advocate because everybody wants more participation in the trials. So there's a real incentive. So thank you for bringing that up.
Absolutely. And thank you for mentioning that because, as you said, it's not standard for that to happen, but more and more we're seeing that the sponsors and pharmaceutical companies and people who run trials are starting to open up and understand that this is a necessity if we're going to be able to be inclusive of all people in trials to be able to support some of these extra costs that are brought on by being on the trial. So how to talk to your provider. Again, if you're interested in the clinical research, just share your goals, the reasons why you're interested with your provider. Make sure that it aligns um, with the trial. So as you identify trials, you can specifically bring them to your provider to see what their thoughts are on it. There's something called an NCT, or the National Clinical Trial ID number, that every single clinical trial has. And I think I'll find a picture of one, but all you need is that number to be able to put that into clinicaltrial.gov, and it will bring up all the information on that trial. And your doctor can find it as well. So it's a nice ID to know if you're considering a trial. Clarify all the logistics again, the schedule of visits, how often you have to be there, have a backup plan, and ask how and what the results are and how they're going to be shared with you and with anyone else. That's very important. The ROR, we call it, the return of results. Diversity in clinical trial. I speak on this a lot for a lot of reasons. It's always been a passion to me because of the health disparities that we have, especially in breast cancer, where we see certain populations don't do as well, and for many, many reasons when they're diagnosed with breast cancer. But one of them, I feel importantly, is that it's because some populations are not represented in clinical research, so we just don't know um, what may be happening, be it genetic level, with these patients, so that their outcomes are disparate. So we think that having a good representation of patients, especially those that reflect not only the US population, but those who are affected by the disease, is important to have in the clinical trial makeup of patients. And so it ensures that the drugs that are being looked at and approved are effective for everyone. It reduces the disparities. It builds trust. I think once someone has gone through a clinical trial, most of the time I've heard nothing but good experiences, not all the time, but I think that helps to engender more trust in people who are interested. Um, we're including community sites, making it easier language-wise with different communities that need the information in their language. We're looking at flexible times, having um, sites open later in the day and on the weekends so people don't have to miss work. And so patient feedback helps us in helping to design more not only accessible but welcoming trials. And just examples of what are considered underrepresented populations in clinical research are ethnic and racial minorities like Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans, social economically disadvantaged and low income patients, those in the rural or remote areas, sexual and gender minorities. It's just LGBTQ hasn't been specifically studied. Older patients, as we age much longer, we're needing to know how drugs work in older bodies. Um, Younger patients, pediatric patients are starting to really get better at better eligibility criteria, and even the young adult population, especially in cancer, because we're seeing the one group that's having an increase in incidence of cancer are younger people below the age of 50. So we really need to make sure we're including them in our trials. So, Jean talked a little bit about being an advocate, which is so important. And if you're an advocate, how you can be involved in the clinical research spectrum. So, you can join patient advisory boards, the FDA. When I was there, they have an open panel of anyone who's interested that you could get on so that you can be asked to be part of the discussions that they have. Every study most studies have protocol review groups that like to involve advocates. I work with a neoadjuvant study called I Spy that is huge adaptive platform study, and we have 30 working groups. Every working group has an advocate on it. And that's the way it should be, from, the development of choosing the agents to the informed consent to our return of results. It involves input from patient advocates. They give feedback on everything, and it's so valuable not only to us, but I think to other patients to come. Let's see. This is just a resource list that I'm just going to have here, and it'll be available online where you can learn about clinical trials and informed consent. And this is the Community Oncology Research Program. These are some resource groups. I put Lazarex in red because they're an amazing cancer foundation that provided all kinds of support, funding, and resource to patients. And I just went to their website and found that December 25th is going to be the last month they'll be open and they'll be closing. And the founder is just an amazing story. So if you have time to go to her website, please look at it. And American Cancer Society, the triage cancer, and some copay relief support. So that was it. I want to thank you for letting me discuss a really important issue, and I hope it's been helpful.
Dr. Horton, this has been great. And I know we might do a demo of one of the trial searches, but I do have a bunch of questions. So maybe we could take some of them on. And I just really appreciate how much you shared all the thought and safety and innovation and changes that have happened with clinical trials, because I think there are so many myths about them. And you did a great job of building that in. So I'm just going to start with the questions. One is, there's a couple of people that are asking about, are there age restrictions? We have women with breast cancer who are 65 or 70, and
Yes.
talk about that.
Yes, there tend to be age restrictions, but we have been in a spectrum of I say loosening, and I hesitate when I say loosening them up because people see that as a negative, but it's actually in a safe way. We're loosening the strict eligibility criteria that has historically been there, so that we are starting to include higher ages. And so there's not a standard cutoff age now for all trials. And so what you need to do is look at the studies, and you'll see that people are getting more comfortable with a higher age, and younger age as well. And they try to make it reflect the disease as well. You know, if we're seeing more younger, like triple negative breast cancer studies, hopefully we'll have a little bit younger age where you start to enroll them. But most of the time it's 18 and up. And I, you know what, I can't think off the top of my head, but I know we've had patients definitely in their 70s and some in their 80s. So yeah,
Okay, that's good to know.
yeah.
And I think this is a good question also. If you decide to join a clinical trial, are you still able to see your regular medical oncologists?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, that's your relationship with that oncologist. You can see them as much as you'd like. The only thing is that they have to be aware that you're on a study, and there are some restrictions about medications you can take. So anytime someone sees their doctor, we like to, if say I'm running a study, I like to not only send my notes to them so they know what's going on, but understand that if anything is given new from that could impact the drug that's being given to them, or if a procedure is done, that needs to be told, and hopefully not done until it's okay with the study.
Right. Okay, that's helpful. This I know has to do with the trial design, but a few people are asking, is it true that only half the people that are in a clinical trial get the novel treatment or are getting a placebo? So sort of, yeah, how do you know what's happening?
Okay. Well, I will tell you that, let's see, where do I start on this one? So, right. So it's not necessarily the case that half the people will get the experimental drug and half will get the standard of care. So that's the kind of the basic makeup of the phase 3 study, the randomized clinical trial. For example, if you're in a phase 2 study, right? So they know it's safe, and now they're looking at how it works, how effective it is. Everybody gets that drug. And in For me, again, I work with a neoadjuvant phase 2 large study that has 4 arms, and everybody gets one of the novel drugs. And you have to, if there's a study you're interested in, that's why it's important to go through it with the doctor so you understand what type of study. Is everybody getting the experimental drug? If they're not, how are they dividing it up? And if it's divided up, what are other people going to be getting? And when we talk about placebo or the sugar pill, as some people call it, it's very rare that you're going to find that in a cancer clinical trial. The only place where a placebo, meaning a medicine or something that doesn't include an actual medicine is given, is if the standard of care is nothing, right? So maybe it's a clinical trial for metastatic pancreatic cancer for patients who have gone through two lines already. And so right now, if you'll look at our cancer guidelines, after two lines of treatment, there's not any specific treatment recommended. And so some people go on to what's called supportive care. Well, some clinical trials want to say, well, maybe there's something that can continue to work after that second line. So here's the study. You'll either get the new drug or best supportive care, which is usually not a medication, but everything else, to make sure that you're feeling okay, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's helpful. And all this information has to be disclosed to the patient, what the trial design and yeah, and
absolutely.
if you're blinded, but some are unblinded.
Right.
Um, so I believe this question is probably coming from someone who's living with metastatic breast cancer and saying if their current treatment is working, why would they consider going into a trial?
So if your current treatment is working, I would not go into a clinical trial. I would keep it in unless it's a clinical trial that doesn't interfere with your treatment.
Right.
So there could be like a supportive trial, like I love the use of yoga or acupuncture. We did a restorative yoga treatment in metastatic breast cancer patients when I was at Howard. And so those type of things don't interfere with the treatment, but it may help you get through the treatment. It may help you long term in helping the treatment work longer. So it depends on the type of study. But if you're talking about another treatment study, I would wait. A lot of times in metastatic disease, the doctor is thinking down the line, we're going to stay on this until it works, until it doesn't work. But be ready with potential options when it doesn't work, which may be a study.
Okay, that's great advice. So we always help metastatic patients to say, always be thinking ahead in case your treatment does stop working. And so, checking out what trials are out there and having those conversations. Are you eligible? So that's great. I think I'm not totally understanding this question, but I think I can phrase it in a way that you can answer it. So the question is it best to go through each stage of the trial? And of course, so can you just, I know you talked about the different phases, but can you just go through that so people understand how different each one is and that you can enter at various phases?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, that slide can be a bit confusing. It doesn't mean you start on phase one and go through all the phases with the study. But what it shows is that there are different studies, phases that every drug has to have, has a trial, like a phase one trial. And then once that's done, then they go on to the phase two. So for me as a patient, it depends on where you are in the disease process, but most people look for either a phase two or a phase three study. Um, and I say that and I hesitate because phase one studies are very, very important too. But most doctors will know if you are someone who would benefit from being in a phase one study. So that's part of the conversation that you really need to have with your provider. So that could be one of your first questions. Do you think that I'd be a good candidate for a clinical trial? And if they say yes, you could say, well, which phase would you think would be good for me? And so they can guide you.
Right. That's helpful. I have to say, I'm looking at the chat. There's a lot of participants who are on trials and have been
Oh,
on more than one. So it's thank you everyone
yes.
for, as you said, you're volunteers, and that's true. You're volunteering to help hopefully yourself, but also everyone who's coming up next. I'm sad to even ask this question, but do you have any insights on how federal cuts might be impacting clinical trials, particularly those in breast cancer?
Yeah, so we're all just kind of bracing ourselves for what's happening. One of the things is that is a little protective almost of clinical research is that a lot of it's done by pharmaceutical companies, not necessarily tied to the federal government. I mean, way back when I was training, 20 some years ago, most of the clinical trials were supported by the government, by NIH and DoD. And we had cooperative groups that were all part of government funding. So anytime something happened with funding, it really, really could stop the amount of research that's being done because pharmaceutical companies are independent. I don't think that research is going to stop, but it may be changed based on what the administration feels is important. So we're all kind of just trying to, dig in and keep moving forward. Right now, the cuts to Medicare and Medicaid may impact clinical trials. We don't know yet. Just, I think in 2023, they passed a Clinical Trial Act that required Medicaid to cover the costs of a patient on a clinical trial where they hadn't before. Not sure if that's going to go away. So far, not done, but we're just waiting to hear.
That's helpful. Thank you. I know that's comes up in every single program we have done this year. So hopefully we'll get moved beyond that. One thing that I've been asked several times by people that are considering trials is they want to know, do the medical oncologists benefit financially if they enroll people?
I, okay, a quick no,
Okay.
a quick no. I want to be totally transparent in that there are some organizations that are starting that I've seen, I have just heard about, where they they help support a patient being on trial if a provider identifies that they're a candidate and they can't like travel there, then they can contact this organization, they can set up the trial, and I think they give the provider some type of resources or funding. I'm not sure. So it's nothing that that happens a lot. I just don't want to say it never ever happens, but that is not the status quo.
Yeah,
Anywhere
no,
else, docs do not get paid
yeah.
for putting people on trials, and pharma doesn't. And so I hate that even put that in there because it's such a kind of fringe thing that I've heard of. But no, there's no money that the institution gets from putting people on study. They get paid to cover the cost of whatever, the nurse has to infuse whatever they would be charging, to insurance if it were off study is what they charge. So it's not, yeah, it's not it, and that's why a lot of places don't do clinical research. It's not lucrative. You don't make money off of in clinical research. So a lot of institutions see it as a losing money policies. So
Yeah, no, that's good to know because I think sometimes, you're so vulnerable when you're diagnosed with breast cancer, any disease, and if a doctor is encouraging something, I think those questions come up. So if it's okay with you and you want to flip back and Dr. Horton will do just a quick demo of one of the clinical trial searches so it feels less intimidating. If it works,
uh,
do it. If not,
Okay, let me pull it up. And I did want to mention when someone asked about the impact of the cuts in research, I don't want to minimize the damage that's been done by the loss of the researchers at NIH and NCI. It's devastating in that these are great researchers who have been just kind of stopped. But luckily, Honestly, a lot are going to different places. They're going to some of the pharmaceutical industries to continue the good work. So hopefully things will change and it'll get back to the way it was, but
Thank you for saying that.
sure. Okay, let me pull this up. There we go. All right.
All right, wait, we don't have it yet.
Okay. Tell me.
Looks like, yes, we have it now.
Okay, let me move this off. All right, so what I was going to do is a quick demonstration of how to find clinical trial metastatic breast cancer clinical trial using clinicaltrials.gov. So this is, I believe this is a landing page, the first page you come to. But what I'm going to do is just click on this trial, metastatic trial search, right? And so you can either just continue as a guest without putting your information in, or you can register and it can save your information for when you come back. None of your information is used, sold, given to anyone at all. That's one of the things I love about this site. So I'm a guest, and so it'll answer questions, it'll match you up, and then you can register at the end if you want to. So it says it's going to open a new tab. And so the first is a set of questions that they're going to talk about for you to answer on your breast cancer biomarkers. At any point, these it, these questions may ask you, these may be questions you don't know the answer to. You can always say unsure. Most of these answers are found on your pathology report, or you can always, make a list of things and ask your doctor. So I'm say I had estrogen receptor. I know it was positive. My progesterone was positive. My HER2, they ask for low now. You may or may not know that because some trials are being done with the low levels of these. I'll say it was HER2 negative. Some people know if they're BRCA1 or 2. I was negative. Androgen receptor, I'm not sure. PDL1, I'll say positive. That's a biomarker. If you're not familiar with it, again, it would be on your pathology report, or you can ask your doctor. PIK3CA, I don't know. I don't know if they've tested me for it. Next. Has your tumor been described as? So the histology, you may know if it's ductal, lobular, inflammatory, metaplastic. Most breast cancers are ductal, maybe lobular, but mine was ductal. Where do you currently have evidence of disease? So that's the metastatic part. You may or may not know all the areas. It doesn't matter. You just put in what you know, select all that apply. May have bone metastases. I don't know what leptomeningeal is. These are the innermost layers of the tissue that cover your brain. So they may have told you if you know you've had any brain involvement, if it's leptomeningeal or not. And then abdominal linings is your peritoneum or your omentum. You'll hear these terms in cancer, but I'll just say to my lung, I know that, and to my bone. What was the date of your metastatic diagnosis? So honestly, the date and year, if you remember, you can make it up, it doesn't matter, but what I'll say is January 25. And the more information you put in, the more it can better find trials. And it's okay not to answer them if you don't want to. Pre or postmenopausal, if you're perimenopausal, I say just put pre, as long as you're having some periods. Otherwise, if you know you're past menopause, postmenopausal. Birth year, my zip code, Black or African American, and you can click as many as you want for your race, Latino or Hispanic, no, highest level of education, postgrad. And that's all demographic information that's helpful to breastcancertrials.org. So yeah, this information is very helpful. Oh, so it took a minute, and I love this. So what it does is it tells you have 279 trials, and this is my profile I put in, and then it shows you a map of the United States. So you get an idea of where they are all over the place. I'm in DC area, so you can filter by several different ways. I mean, you can always just start going down through the trials. I'll just give you a quick snapshot. all of these trials are trials that are from clinicaltrials.gov. So breastcancertrials.org contains all of the breast cancer trials that are in clinicaltrials.gov, but they curate them and they repost them in a way that it's easy for you to understand and find. It does, if you decide you're interested in it, you'll click and it'll take you to clinicaltrials.gov that has the whole, exhaustive list of everything about that trial. But it tells me this study right here, sacituzumab is for HER2 positive, HR is hormone receptor, ER or PR positive. HER2 negative breast cancer, that's what I had. It's Holy Cross is right up the street from me. And here's that NCT ID number I was talking about. You jot that down. That helps you find it in clinicaltrials.gov, and it's a phase 3 trial. Gives a short synopsis to tell what it's about and who it's for. It's for advanced, so it's some stage 3 or stage 4. So that includes me, ER positive, HER2 negative, and who received hormonal therapy with a CDK4 inhibitor for advanced disease. So it'll be important for you to know what you've had before. For this trial, I will have needed to have had a CDK4/6 like ribociclib or abemaciclib or one of those, and you must not have received chemotherapy. So you could have hormone therapy, like the aromatase inhibitors or tamoxifen or exemestane. You can have had that. You can have had one of the CDK4/6 inhibitors, but no chemotherapy for metastatic disease or advanced disease. You could have had it if you were treated with, say, AC and Taxol for in the adjuvant setting. So I'm like, okay, maybe this is something I'm interested in. You can look at the full eligibility criteria. This takes you to clinicaltrials.gov. I'll go to the top, clinicaltrials.gov, and this is their whole official study overview and all of the information that you'll need for the study. It lists all of the sites too. So you can find yours, like if I wanted to look for Maryland, it's in Baltimore, it's in Silver Spring, Maryland. That's the one close to me. And I can look in Washington, D.C. And anyway, they're all listed here. And I'm going to go back because that took me to the eligibility criteria. And that has all of the inclusion and exclusion criteria that you can delve into a little bit deeper here. It's 18 years and older. I don't even know if they have an upper cutoff for age. I'll have to start looking into that if they're just open-ended now. And then clinicaltrials.gov, along with breastcancertrials.gov, I didn't go further in, but it will list what the protocol is, which is your experimental arm A, which is the drug, and then pembrolizumab plus the sacituzumab is the other arm, and then treatment of physician's choice is usually your standard of care. So this gives us what the trial is about. I'm going to go back to clinicaltrials.gov. I can filter this by saying, I only want trials that are within 50 miles of where I live and of my zip code. And you can say if you want phase 1, 2, or 3, I leave it open and apply the filter. Okay. And then the last thing is here you can, if you put your information in and log in, you can get set up for trial alerts where they will send you a ping email anytime a new trial opens up that matches up to your what you've put in as your criteria. So let me stop sharing.
Yeah, you did a great job. I think you can see that when you're using the breast cancer clinical trial search, it's so much easier than once you get on to clinicaltrials.gov, it gets more confusing. There's someone who made a really good comment that often public librarians or university librarians can help you with this. Obviously, your healthcare providers. There's a lot of other resources because it can get pretty detailed. And I think you saw they give the chemical name of the drug and then they give the brand name. I know that can also be really confusing to patients, but
Yes.
I really appreciate that demo because I think it kind of reduces the intimidation. You don't have to log in, you can just play around with it. You don't, or you can have a friend play around with it and then go in. So I'm
Yes.
really, this was a fantastic presentation. There were so many positive comments in the chat. Yeah,
Good.
and gratefulness for you. And so I want to thank you so much